Welcome to Sister Friends. I'm Angie Gray here with my amazing friend,
ReShonda Young.
And together we're diving into what's at the heart of it all, relationships.
From finances and family to the ups and downs of life partnerships, and even those relationships we have with ourselves. We're here to talk about the real stuff.
We're not shying away from the hard conversations, we're leaning into them because we believe that when we start talking, we start understanding.
And when we understand, we grow in empathy, compassion, and connection.
So grab a seat,
grab a friend, and let's
get into it. Hello, I'm Angie Gray.
And I'm ReShonda Young.
And we are Sister Friends. So thanks, everybody. We're excited. We've talked a little bit about this book right here called Invisible Women, and it's about the data bias in a world designed for men is the subtitle. And the author is Carolyn Criado Perez. If I'm not botching her name, sorry, Carolyn. So we've talked a little bit about how it's for me, it's been pretty much life-changing. And ReShonda is a little bit ahead of me as we've listened to Audible and read this book. But today we're going to break it down a little bit, and we'll probably talk a couple of podcast episodes about this. But we want to get into it a little bit. And so my idea was to just read, because it's so packed with, for me, crazy ahas and shocking things. So I think this part is really important to know. It was for me, and as I shared it, this part at the end is really important. So this is part of the preface of the book, Invisible Women. Most of recorded human history is one big data gap. Starting with the theory of man the hunter, the chronicles of the past have left little space for women's role in the evolution of humanity, whether cultural or biological. Instead, the lives of men have been taken to represent those of humans overall. When it comes to the lives of the other half of humanity, there is often nothing but silence. And these silences are everywhere. Our entire culture is riddled with them. Films, news, literature, science, city planning, economics. The stories we tell ourselves about our past, present, and future. They're all marked, disfigured, by a female-shaped absent presence. This is the gender data gap. The gender data gap isn't just about silence. These silences, these gaps, have consequences. They impact on women's lives every day. The impact can be relatively minor. Shivering in offices set to a male temperature norm, for example, or struggling to reach a top shelf set at a male height norm. Irritating, certainly. Unjust, undoubtedly, but not life-threatening, not like crashing in a car whose safety measures don't account for women's measurements. That's a biggie. Not like having your heart attack go undiagnosed because your symptoms are deemed atypical. For these women, the consequences of living in a world built around a male data can be deadly. Let me read that last sentence again. For these women, the consequences of living in a world built around male data can be deadly, and have been. One of the most important things to say about the gender data gap is that it is not generally malicious or even deliberate. That was an important part for me, as I have 4 men in my household. Quite the opposite. It is simply the product of a way of thinking that has been around for millennia and is therefore a kind of not thinking, a double not thinking even. Men go without saying, and women don't get said at all. Because when we say human, on the whole, we mean man. Okay, so for me, that was... we wanted to share that part with you, so to get the introduction, and then of course the book is brilliant.
Yeah. Today we're going to pick out one chapter, which I think has been your favorite chapter so far. Mm-hmm. It's been super interesting to me as well, which is chapter 3, which talks about the last Friday.
Yeah.
And so what the last Friday is, it was basically in 1975, the UN declared that like the Women's Year. And so I'm kind of proud to have been born in 1975.
Yes.
Yeah. So it was the Women's Year, and it was the women of Iceland who determined that they were going to do something pretty big, like to make this year count. And that's so fun. Also, like reading this because
awesome.
It's pretty
Oh,
amazing.
you were just in Iceland,
and I
yeah.
was just in Iceland. So,
Oh my gosh, that's so cool. Yeah, I
yeah.
hadn't
So
thought
when
about
they were
that.
talking about like the square in Reykjavik and all, I was like,
been
oh
there.
yeah, we were there. Beth and I were there.
Yep.
So
Hi, Beth.
and so basically, the women decided that on October 24th of 1975, that women would do no work. They would do no paid work. They would do no unpaid work. And at that time, the country had only like 220,000 people, including, kids as well. And so 90% of Icelandic women took part in this day of we're taking a day off.
Yeah.
And so the men, they had to figure out childcare. They had to figure out cooking, cleaning. They had to figure out like school. So like the schools were closed because the women weren't working.
Wow.
It talks about how kids were like all hyped up on sugar because that's what the men were doing
so
to bribe
funny.
them to
Yeah.
behave. And they're like bouncing all over the office.
Yeah.
But even though it sounds like just something like super fun to do, Iceland, a year later, they passed the Gender Equality Act.
Wow.
And that outlawed sex discrimination in the workplace and in schools, which is something that the U.S. maybe needs to like snap.
Yeah. 1975, right?
That
where
was
there's
so they passed in 1976, and so basically, then 5 years later, the first female became head of state. She beat 3 men to become head of state.
Wow.
Iceland is like the most gender neutral, gender equal country that there is now. And that was all because of what the women did back on that one day in 1975.
Yes.
So one quote that really stood out to me, and it says, "There's no such thing as a woman who doesn't work. There's only a woman who isn't paid for her work."
That's the one I wrote down. I was telling you.
Is it?
Yes.
Okay.
Same quote. Very cool. Twin
Loved it.
braining. Yes. Read that again, would you please?
There's no such thing as a woman who doesn't work. There's only a woman who isn't paid for her work.
So good.
Right?
So huge. And it's shocking to me that so the UN announced this was going to happen. And that's interesting because, of course, in the 70s, we had a lot of stuff going on, right? People were really talking about these issues or trying to bring them up, have them be at front of mind in the 70s. We talked about that, didn't we, the other day? We got into that. Oh, I hope that comes up again. That was big. But how did we miss that boat? But it's very cool. I mean, as a country, like how cool for me and us to think about what a group of women can do.
Exactly.
But also
when they band together, right?
Yeah, that they banded together regardless of what their, bigger views were, maybe what so cool. And I think that what also is cool is what had to happen is these first of all, the government had to be okay with that, right? Probably.
Well,
and the men had to be, I mean, they didn't have to be okay, but I would think there was some coordination there. I'm just trying to wrap my head around this. Like if we just decided one day, and it's secret, let's just keep it a secret. We wouldn't even, you know why we wouldn't do that? Because there would be no children. There would be no one to take care of the children. Like you'd have to, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like they'd just be like walking around, like not getting fed. And so and these women are, at least a good majority of them are moms and aunts and teachers. They're not just going to abandon their kids, right? So,
but in Iceland they did.
For
that one day.
But they didn't. They told people, right?
Well,
I don't remember.
Yeah, I mean,
that's what I'm saying.
It was the 5 biggest women's organizations got together and decided that that's what they were going to do. The women were going to have a day off.
Yeah.
And so while they were having their day off in the square in Reykjavik, the men had to figure it out. Like the grocery stores.
I want to investigate this now.
Like all the things were like shut down when the women didn't show up.
I'm blown away. So like, I mean, that certainly couldn't be like nurses. You know, what's the statistics,
they're
like
probably
90
part of the
something percent
10%
that stayed.
that stayed.
Because
I
they
would say
would have to. I
they've
mean,
got
what are
to
you going
take
to do?
care. Yeah, you can't just
But that,
reset
what,
people.
I'm just like, did they, look at me, I can't even form sentences. Did they tell their men? Do you know what I mean? These
Yeah.
organizations, did they let the men know? Because the ones that would suffer, although we're trying to wake people up and say, hi, remember me, I do have
Right.
value,
Yeah.
and all the important messaging. Also, you're thinking about, okay, well, the kids can't suffer for this. Like the nurses didn't leave because they can't let the patients suffer. We're clearly
Right.
not letting children suffer. So I just wonder that what they had to do, like, to make that happen is fascinating to me.
Yeah.
How organized did they need to be, or were they just like, oh well,
No, they were.
too
They
bad,
were
so
really
sad.
organized. Yeah. 25,000 women gathered for the rally.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. That was amazing, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah, no cooking, no cleaning, no childcare.
So this is making me think of this, and I started to tell you this, and so at one point, so you guys, okay, so I work with nurses, right? I do a lot of work with coaching and training in healthcare for nurses and nurse leadership and their teams and stuff. And earlier on in the year, like early on in the year 2024, there's been a lot of shifting within nursing and raising awareness around a profession and autonomy and innovation, being recognized for the badass job that nurses do and
Yeah.
are really undervalued traditionally and overall, very undervalued. And that's a whole, I mean, that's a whole thing that we can wrap around this, that let's do it. Let's definitely talk about that as an episode, because the public actually needs to know.
Yeah.
Anyway, I had this idea of like, okay, how do we get heard, man? There are like, you know, so many of these amazing nurses that are thought leaders and innovators and are doing some, like I said, badass SHIT. They're doing some good things in the world and not getting recognized for it. And, you know, it's like raising the banners and doing all the things. And so what do we do? Like it felt at that moment in time that, and it absolutely comes back to that feeling every once in a while, just like, what are we, is anyone hearing us? Right. Is anyone hearing us? And there's like 5 million nurses, 5 million plus nurses
Right.
in the world. And why are we not being heard? So, of course, even before my wake up here, most recent wake up with as a woman and reading this book, I knew intuitively, and that's because 99.8% of them are women.
Yeah.
And the men are along for the ride, but that's one reason why they're not being heard. But anyway, I had this idea that I was like, and I'm going to give it away, but I think that I'm going to do this at some point, is I asked some of my friends, I said, what would happen if I created this one image that said, my thing is loving disruption. So I have a hashtag that's loving disruption. And men primarily don't like the word disruption, because that means change. That means we're going to do something different.
Yeah.
From my perspective, it's about all through the lens of love. So this is disruption that's hoping to cause meaningful change.
Yeah.
And done through a lens of love, not violence and all the things.
Sure.
So I thought, well, let's build this, or let's just have this image that says loving disruption, or whatever we say. And all of the nurses, we get a whole bunch of us. It wouldn't even have to be that many of us, but let's spread the word, basically.
Sure.
And instead of posting anything on LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram or whatever, this is what we do. And did I tell you this?
No.
I did it
You
because
didn't.
respectfully, I was like, let's use the amazing example of Black Lives Matter and the example of that day that they did that incredible, moving, you know, where people just had the one thing that they posted. It was a black square, right? It might, tell me if I'm saying this wrong, but that's what it was, right?
Yeah.
And it was moving, and so many people did it, and it meant something, and it sent a really strong message that needed to be said. And so, you know, that's what was part of the content that I put together, was so using the examples before us, and respectfully using the courage of that. Here's what we do. We just have that, and we don't post anything else for like the whole week. What kind of message would that send? Anyway, it's just inspiring. It's so inspiring to hear that these women did that.
It is. It is. And then you just think like the way that that changes their lives, like not just, the symbolic thing.
Yeah.
But as we've talked about, like poverty rates for women, especially for elderly women, so much higher than for men.
Yeah.
And, that being tied to women not getting paid for the work that they do, so you're working in the home, but you don't get paid for it.
Yeah.
You're not building up Social Security for it. You're not building up a retirement plan for it.
Yeah.
And so,
I know.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And even when we think about the pay gap, and the thing that I testified before, the second thing I testified before Congress about was the Paycheck Protection Act or Fairness Act, paycheck fairness. So there would be transparency around what people were getting paid.
Yeah.
So
isn't that cool to know that you had something to do with raising awareness around that and making things happen? Like, yes,
I guess I hadn't thought about it like that, but it's just such an important thing. Like, it's just so important.
It's so important.
It is so important. And so, and it was, all these stereotypical responses from the senators who were there.
The men.
Yes. And my whole thing was, God, don't let my face show what I'm really thinking, because that C-SPAN camera is right there in my face. And I'm just like, what in the world are you talking about? Like, women shouldn't be paid. Oh my gosh, I am so sorry. So, women shouldn't be paid equal necessarily because one of the guys said, they've been out of the workforce. They maybe need to, or they maybe will have to take time off to take care of the kids or go to soccer games or whatever. And you're just like, what? Are you kidding me? Like, that doesn't even make sense. So we shouldn't be paid equal because of that. There shouldn't be fairness around
So I'm
pay.
going to share this. Yes, I'm going to share the very first thing. So this was, I don't even know how many years ago. We shared this in the first podcast, so I'm going to repeat it because it was life-changing, but it ties into this. Is we were on our walk, and I don't know how the conversation started, but you were sharing with me how you worked for your dad.
Yeah.
And you shared with me, I'm going to say it, or should you say it? You just do it. You just tell me.
Well, yeah, just how when I realized that the women doing the same job as men were not getting paid equal.
Because you were doing payroll.
I was part of what I was doing was payroll.
Yep.
And so when I realized it, I'm like, hey, what's going on with this? And then
Same job. Man, woman, man was getting paid more.
Sometimes the woman was doing more, like definitely of higher benefit at times than, some of the men who were in the same roles, and they were like getting paid like quite a bit less. For one of the roles in particular, she was actually like the manager, supervisor over the guys. She was getting paid just a little over half of what the guys were that she was supervising. Like, I am not even joking. So ridiculous to me.
Still
and
shocking.
So, yeah. And so, he's like, well, the men, they have, child support maybe, or they've got,
so
homes.
To be clear, so you went to your dad and said,
yeah, like,
hey, what's up?
What's up? Yeah. So he says, the men, they may have child support or other things that they need to be, taken care of. And the women, they, have husbands or, they've got people that can take care of them. And I'm just like, what? As your daughter who, like, I'm not looking for some man to take care of me.
Yeah.
And what are you talking about? And when nothing was done, I just decided I would call our accountant, and I gave all the women a raise.
You did?
I did.
You did not tell me that part of the story.
I didn't tell you that?
No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. So that became a really big deal down the road when one of the women ended up leaving, and it was disgruntled. But she was bringing up that the pay was not equal. Yeah. But I also had not just done that, but I had then retroactively paid what should have been paid.
Oh my gosh, that's so great.
And so there was no claim at that point because I had already made things. Made things right. But Yeah. And then when I was testifying before Congress, and you got this big, supposedly small business organization, which is not a small business organization, but that's a conversation for another day. And they had a woman on the panel, and she was representing that organization, and she was going along with this thing of the women should not be paid the same as the men. And I was like, her woman card needs to be snatched and never given back to her.
Why did she say that?
Of course, it's about being
deep.
paid.
Sure.
She's getting paid to say this.
Yeah, oh, for sure.
I
Yeah.
could not believe it. I thought, you can't pay me to get up and say such nonsense.
Wow.
And speak out against like women and what we deserve, what's right. I simply could not believe it. I'm sure the C-SPAN camera got a pretty good look on my face because I'm just
you weren't
like,
hiding
what?
that one. I have a question. So that day when I learned that, so that was just really pivotal. So thank you. And I'm so grateful for all the things, especially in the financial world that you've taught me. But I think it is one of those things, one of the many things that I just was super unaware of. It didn't touch me. I didn't think, that was the mindset, and I didn't know. So what a pivotal thing for me in changing my life. And then very, very amazing. But I have a question.
Yeah.
So what do you say to, because I have been part of, and not able to articulate an answer, but I've been part of conversations with men that say that's not true. Well, that is not true. And I say, well, I know it's true. Yeah.
Well, you can even look at public record of like at the universities, so you can see what every person makes. You can go and look and see what different people, if you know people there, or you can just look at the data. There's data that's collected on it. But just locally, you can look at the university website. It's not the university website, but it's like you can look and you can find out what each position pays. And you're just like, are you kidding me?
And so that's clear. Like, not to get into the weeds, but so you tell me, what would an argument be? Because I still hear, like present day, you hear men say, in my experience, that's just not true. Women have the same opportunities. They're not. So you know this is your thing.
Well, just look at the data.
Yeah.
The data doesn't lie.
Yeah.
It is what it is. Numbers are numbers.
Okay. So going one step further.
Yeah.
And so where would you go? So you would go to just what? Like, what website do you go to? Like, again, dude, we're not dudette. You're not a dude. But we're not throwing men under the bus. If I'm zealous in these conversations, for me, like, you are ahead of me as far as understanding these things and the awareness around this. I am not fully ready to say, raise my hand. Hey, I have not done my homework, and whatever the reasons, I don't have any shame or guilt around it. I'm just pumped. I'm actually just really excited to represent me and represent my children and represent my community and be more present in who I am for every relationship. Like, it's just, we were saying before this that I don't know how to articulate. It's just permeated me, and it's an excitement. It is not a throw anyone under the bus. It's not throw any men under the bus. I love men. But it is absolutely a fairer conversation, maybe,
Yeah.
So, I get to bring to the table.
You could just Google. Everybody can Google. You can
Google what though? Like,
you can just Google
specific.
Like, what is the gender pay gap, and where's the data? What is the data that supports it?
Okay.
You could Google that and get the a bunch of information. You could probably chat GPT it.
Yeah,
and
right.
also find that. I did a fun little experiment when I was selling popcorn. And so there was
Popcorn
an event.
heaven.
Yeah. So when I did that, I went to this event, and at the event I just did all these little mini bags of popcorn that I was selling for $1.
Okay.
If you were a man. But if you were a woman, you only had to pay 77 cents, because at that time the data
that's so
showed
funny and
that
awesome.
that the gender
That
pay
was
gap
the,
was, it was 70 on average.
Wow.
It was 77 cents on the dollar. Now it all varies too based on race.
Okay,
So
yeah.
gender and race make a difference. Asian women are paid at the highest rate, and Black and Hispanic women are paid at the
So
lowest, and then white women are paid like in the middle of there.
Wow.
So for some, it's less. At that point, it was less than 77 cents on a dollar. And so, there were men who were like, well, that's not fair. Why are they not paying as much? So they're buying multiple bags, and it's
What did you say, for
small.
reals? What did you say?
Oh, well, it's to highlight the fact that on average, women are paid 77 cents on the dollar. So I
Did you
used
have
it.
any conversations during that
Absolutely.
time?
And I
You
had
did.
information
Nice.
and like
You
all
did? Oh my
kinds of
gosh, that's
things.
so
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. Because it's just like people need to know, like there's awareness that needs to be made around that. And so it's like, if we're going to get paid less, then we should have to pay less. And so it was just kind of a fun little thing. And,
Yeah.
and men got it when I did that. Like they got it.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what are they going to say? Maybe they left and they were like mad, but who knows? But at
Right.
least they, people
Yeah.
stayed and had the conversation.
Well, and they did. They had the conversation. And I can't say that there was one person who didn't spend their dollar.
Oh, sure.
But it was just kind of like, well, that's not fair. And just having an opportunity to
raise
educate
awareness.
and raise awareness and
That's
give.
so awesome.
So, I had just printed out a few little things so that it was just educational.
Yeah. What a cool idea. No, you didn't tell me. I told you guys were going to learn all these things about each other that we have zero ideas.
So many things.
So may I talk a little bit about my thoughts are around the not paid part of women's responsibilities? Well, okay, that's I'm challenging myself a lot, right? On the words that I would previously have used. Responsibilities. What do I think about that? Women's responsibilities. I don't think it's a woman's responsibility, actually. It's, when I'm talking about kids, it's our responsibilities, are our children. Okay.
Yeah.
So, so I have, this is interesting. Okay. So with, Todd and I have 7 children. I have a nursing degree. I was nursing at the time that we got married. I was finishing up school and then started full time, and I worked full time for whatever, I don't know, 12 years or something like that. And then we just decided together to stayed home for 18 years and, raised 7 kids and homeschooled and did all of the traditional woman things. Yeah. Todd did all the traditional man things. He worked, he's an incredibly hardworking, in fact, workaholic for sure, recognized workaholic, but has provided amazing. I cannot be prouder of who he is and the work that he's done and what he's accomplished. That being said, and I didn't feel like I needed that, any like recognition or anything like that, until it felt like I did. Do you know, so in it, I loved it. I mean, I chose it. I mean, it's not for everyone,
right?
But I feel very, very fortunate that we had the means. I mean, definitely we had government help at certain times of our life. We definitely made sacrifices to do that, but I absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
Loved it. I feel super grateful. I think it was one of the best decisions we ever made. That being said, at a certain point, whatever years it was, 15 years ago, ish, I felt like, okay, I'm being called back to do work. And there's stuff in me that I want to get out and I want to serve different ways.
Yeah.
So that was when, at that time, it was when things started to shift, and I started to notice, and had opportunities that I felt I needed to stand up for myself. Where before, I don't even know, this is such a big thing, but definitely started to recognize, I don't feel very appreciated. Like this is actually what I've done here. It's appreciated, but it's different. Okay, so this is how I'm going to say it, and we don't have to talk about this the whole time, but I think it's people will want to talk about this, I think, in a way that, all right, so let me articulate it. And again, I'm not throwing my husband under the bus, but we've had some important conversations about it.
Yeah.
Okay, so how do I say this? So it's like, appreciated, not, oh, this isn't going to be the right word, valued. Okay, so that's not even the right word probably. Appreciated the power to make decisions was not accessible to me. There, and I think this is probably very common. For us, it was, and that's all I need to know. Is for us, it was not malicious. It was the societal norm, and this is how it is. Todd was totally not aware of it. I was not aware of it until I was. And so that led to many, many different things as I started to work in as an entrepreneur, creating my own things. All of a sudden, not just for Todd, but for the kids, I'm not as available anymore. And so what does that look like? So financially, I guess there were times where I would say, let's make a list of the things that you do and the things that I do. And we never did this, mind you. We never did it, but it was the power piece that I would play, if that makes sense. Like when I would feel like I needed to get big or needed to prove myself. And so I would say, let's just make a list, because I think there are so many things you probably don't. And I probably don't realize the things you do.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We never made that list. But of course, everything on my list would have been unpaid. And then people started coming out, I don't know how many years ago, and talking about if you had to hire a babysitter, if you had to hire a teacher, if you had to hire a taxi service, those things that we've all seen, worth a heck of a lot of money. Yeah, I don't know really I'm going with that, except for that was a big awareness to me it wasn't until it was.
Until it was.
Yeah.
Right. So then you have to, I'm guessing, really talk and like through your financial planning to make sure that Angie is taken care of if something were to untimely, happen to Todd.
Yeah.
You've got to, there's just, I think the planning becomes a little bit different. It's always important, but it becomes a little bit different. But I think also there's probably even like while you're doing fine, when you get to the age of Social Security, like there's still so much less that you will get. How do you equalize all of that? And I'm not asking how you guys do, but it's one of those things where like when I've done financial planning with couples and you have generally, it wasn't always, but generally the man was making more and I would try and structure things so that like the things went into a pool so that each person is valued equally financially. Or if they weren't comfortable with that pool, then it's like, okay, well, let's see what percentage, because there were some couples that were like,
where you're going with this is so good.
Where there were some of the couples, like some of them were like, no, I don't want to do that. Like, which is tough. Yeah. But my solution then was like, okay, well, what percentage of the total income that comes into this house comes in under hers and what comes in under his, like work, like what they're paid. And then what are the total bills for the house? And so then based on what the percentage is, that's the percentage of bills that the person has to pay. So if her income was, let's say 30% of his, then her responsibility for the household bills was 30% of what the household bills were. We're not doing this 50-50 thing.
Very good, very good.
So we're not doing the 50-50 because if really you do 50-50, in a lot of situations, it could leave her with nothing. Yeah. So then she's having to ask him, well, can I get money for sometimes necessities? It's like, we're not doing that. Not if I'm going to be helping you plan. Like, okay, we don't want to do the pool where we just split things. Then we at least need to do, like if you're both working, like we're only paying bills based on.
This goes so deep. I'm thinking like 5 or 6 other questions as you're saying that, like even going back to even like this book about talking about, and I've had conversations already, like many conversations with our kids about how we think. So don't let me get too far away from this because it is tied. I'm just going to hopefully make it clear to what you just said about, so the woman, if you get paid 30% of all the income, then you're in charge of that whole setup. I love that. The thought was around how if she's in a job that only pays her this much, and a guy's chosen this professional space, and it pays him this much. So assumingly he's getting paid more because of the profession that he's in.
Sure.
And she's in this profession that's not paying as much.
Right.
Not the same professions. That would be a different deal.
Yeah.
So it's also interesting, and again, how it goes so deep is like the mindset around what we are trained to think we're capable of doing as women. Like it's notoriously and historically and all the things, we're not guided to professions that are paying more. So, right? I mean, tell me if I'm off, but like that's what this book is also talking about. And that conversation was really cool. We had, I don't want to throw anybody under the bus because the kids that we were talking to, I was talking to, were super self-aware and really open to seeing gaps in the way they were thinking. But one of the kids that I was talking to was thinking about, I asked the question, so what do you like about being a man?
Yeah.
And his answer was, well, I really, and bless his heart, okay, one of my favorite people on the planet, favorite. But his response was, well, I really like, and remember the question was, what do you like about being a man? And the response was, I like that I'm very analytical. I like that I'm able to get a lot of things done. I can really plan well. And I mean, the description was like all these things that he could do, but the messaging was, and I do that. I'm able to do that because I'm a man. And even in that same conversation, blessing his heart again, he said, and I don't think, naming the woman that he's in a relationship with, and I don't think she's necessarily built that way. So what was so great about it is that we were able to talk about it again and say, actually, she is built to do that same thing.
Yes.
And you're actually built to be all the things that she is. Right. Your capacity is the same to be emotionally intelligent.
Yeah.
You know, and vice versa. Anyway, just interesting to understand and be aware of the things that we're guiding our children to do. I think we're better, but in so many ways we haven't gone very far. And I take responsibility for that, actually, and my part that I play, the role that I've had in now those, I am aware. So now that I know, didn't know what I didn't know, but now I know. And so now I am responsible for what I do with that.
Yeah. Such a good point. Such a good point. And even just the perception that even though, I mean, it's been 20 years now, or 20 something years, but when I was telling you the story about when I was early 20s and early mid 20s, and I was at a particular church, and it was after Bible study one night. One of the deacons, who he's not more than maybe 10 years older than me, as we're walking out, he is talking to me, and he says, "Oh yeah, you'll never get a man. You're too strong. You'll never get a man."
Yep.
And I was like, "What?" Like, well, I guess if he can't handle, you know, a strong woman, I probably shouldn't be with him anyway. Yeah. But even just to make that comment to a young woman, like, what's that about? Yeah. You know?
Yeah. And how that, honestly, who's to say, but I mean, it doesn't look, based on what I know and who you are, that had a grave, you know, impact on you. However, who knows, like, you know, what barriers that had for you subconsciously or whatever.
Or the motivation that it had for me to do even more. Right. For me, it was like, all right, well, I'll show you, you know,
Yes,
I'm going to keep doing more.
Thankfully.
And I'm not, I mean, having a guy has not been a problem, you know, like that's not, but I could have let it get into my head. Like, oh man, maybe I shouldn't be, you know, buying houses and all these things as a single woman and being a landlord.
It's
you know,
mind blowing to me
it
that you
could
did all that.
it could have really had a different effect.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
anyway.
And you know, what's the saying that I'll botch? Well, I mean, I think that's power. I think that that's an awareness about who you are, whatever the motivation was.
Mm-hmm.
So we both feel like completely coming from different lived experiences,
Mm-hmm.
but here now, understanding that we have power in a way that we know what we know and we feel led to talk about it. So like right now, that's changing. That's changing the way people think.
Agree.
You know,
I
like
agree.
now we're talking about it, and it's so exciting. This is also make so next thing. The book talks a lot about health disparities, and we'll talk more about that. I'd love to talk more about that. We've alluded to a few things in talking about your health and some things, but I think next episode would be really good to talk about health disparities and gender data gaps there. Talking about that comment that deacon made to you, and how thankfully it didn't, dampen who you are. Instead, it had the reverse effect where you're digging your heels in and you're going to show them, right?
Yeah.
Thankfully.
Yeah, that stubbornness in me, I
Yeah.
tell you.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Thankfully.
Thanks, Mom.
Yeah, well, that's what that's right.
Yeah.
You had a mom that
Yeah.
was giving you messaging and loving you in a way that set you up to not believe the lies that people are going to tell
Right.
you
Right.
as a human being, as a Black woman, as a woman, all the things.
Right.
So we know we've been talking about these conversations post-election last episode, and some of the great conversations that have come from that have been for me about women. And I don't know how it's happening, but like I said, this is like permeating like every conversation. So I'm so grateful. One of the things that was a post-election conversation was between two people I love very much, and married couple. And it was a really hard conversation about one person was really happy with the outcome. Well, not really, I'm not going to say really happy, but
Yeah.
it was the way that they voted, and the other not so much. And the other was really hurting. I didn't share this last episode, did I? I feel like I don't even know if we remember. Forgive me, audience, if we're saying this again, but the point was that the male in the relationship did not know how to show up for his wife.
Yeah.
She was hurting. She vulnerably shared with him that, okay, so the situation was she walked into a gym the next day after the election.
Okay.
Did I tell you this? I
You
don't
didn't
think I
tell me
did.
this.
Okay, so good. That means y'all probably don't know. So, and I have permission from her to talk about this, but so she walked into the gym the next morning, and it was a gym that always has lots of men and very few women in it. And so, but she was the only woman in the gym, and we feel this already, right? But she walked in and she was feeling really extra vulnerable because of the heightened awareness around everything that had been happening and her personal feelings and values around the way the election went. And so she texted her husband and said, I am here in the gym and there's a lot of men in here and I'm feeling not very safe. Okay. So her husband did not text back.
Oh.
And so there was a period of time where that felt pretty gross for her. And anyway, when I was talking to her about it, she was pretty upset, and I ended up having the honor of talking to him about it later. And I'm really grateful for that. And these are like literally top of the tier human beings. And yet, and this man is absolutely emotionally intelligent, one of the best human beings in men, as men go, like all the things that you would hope, and amazing. And so we were chatting, and he was sharing really vulnerably his frustrations. He's like, so we talked a bit about maybe reasons why she might be feeling that way, but a couple things stand out. So his question was, what was I supposed to do about that? And it was shocking to me that he didn't know, like he didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
So I said, so what you do about that is you lean in, no matter what the situation was, if your wife is calling you or texting you and saying she doesn't feel safe, doesn't matter if you don't understand it, you don't agree with it, whatever it is, you text her back or you call her back and you simply say, what can I do?
Yeah.
Do you want me? And actually he said that. He said, should I just have said, go pick her? Actually, no, I'm sorry. How it went was I said, well, what do you think you should have done?
Mm-hmm.
And first he said, I don't know. And then I just let it sit. And then he said, should I have gone to pick her? I should have told her that I'd come pick her up. And he asked me that a question, but of course he knew. And I said, yeah, that's what you do. So you don't have to understand, but you do need to lean in and ask, what can I do?
Mm-hmm.
So that led to a story that I shared with him about me. I said, do you know my whole life I've been walking at my house. I've lived here 30 years and I walk. We live out in the country. Mm-hmm. I've shared this a couple times now and it's visceral. Like it's right here. And it seems like such a, sorry, it is emotional.
Yeah.
It's in like so many layers, but of why it's emotional. I said, I have walked here for 30 years and every time I go for a walk down something very familiar, for 30 years, I always have my phone. It's always charged. I have probably taken hundreds. Okay, let's just say I've taken for sure 100 pictures of cars that have driven by me. Mm-hmm. I've taken video. I always call Todd, and how many conversations I've said, okay, so I'm just going to act like I'm talking to you because there's some people up here or that car, you know, so we're just going to chat. I took a picture. I'm sending it to you now, the license plate. And so I'm telling him this, and I said, would you ever do that? If you went for a walk down my street or my road, would you ever think to do that?
Right.
And he said no. And I said, okay, so that is like the smallest example of how you don't know. And so because you don't know, it is literally your job. If you want meaningful change, yes, that in the big world way. But if you want to have a strong foundation of trust in your relationship, whether it's related to the election or anything, you have to lean into the unlived experiences that you don't understand and ask.
Yeah.
You need to be curious. And this is what we said last time. You need to be curious. You need to ask questions. And then again, then it happened with my husband the other night. There was a movie on and it was a scary kind of a thing about, I don't know. We didn't watch it, ended up watching it, but it was about rape or something. I don't know, but we put it on and the situation looked like this. So the guy or the woman is going through a really hard time. Her child had died and her child had fallen off the side of this mountain. And so she was on this hike to go kind of be where her child had died. And it was like on a path on a mountain and remote. And so she goes up to the top of the mountain and she's actually suicidal. And she's standing on the side of the mountain really hurting and remembering this. And it's by herself. It's remote. And then the scene is a man comes up the path and he's also on a hike and he ends up being at the same place that she is. And she looks at him. He's like, hi. He said, beautiful day. And from there, I asked Todd to stop it right there. I didn't know what was going to happen, but I could feel what was going to happen. Of course, everybody else can feel that, obviously. But I said, Todd, can you stop that for a second? So mind you, audience, like we're sharing is that these are new things, many new things for me coming up. And I'm looking at life, relationships, everything through a different lens, and I'm grateful for it. He stopped the movie and I said, so honey, if that was you and you were on a hike and you are at the top of this mountain and you were just enjoying this view, you're not suicidal, okay? You're just up there on this hike, beautiful day by yourself, enjoying some time by yourself. And you're up at the top of this mountain and a woman comes up unexpected. She's on a hike too, but there's no one else around, just the two of you. And she says, beautiful day. Would you be afraid? And he said, no. And I said, I would be terrified.
Yeah.
And you know, I did tell you something like this. And what did you tell me when I told you about the walk?
Yeah.
A couple of days ago. What did you tell me?
I always have like pepper spray or something of protection for myself when I'm out. It doesn't matter if it's broad daylight. You just don't know. So it's just one of those things. Like I feel almost like naked if I don't have something
Yes.
when I'm out on my walks.
Yeah.
And,
Charged phone,
or
pepper spray.
down at the garden, which is, you've been there, it's kind of a little remote.
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah. Anything could happen there.
Yep.
So
things that we have to think about that I don't like, for me, I'd never even actually thought about, right? It's just something I do since we were little. And as we grow older, we become subconsciously, is this going to make sense? Yes, subconsciously more aware, subconsciously of what we need to do. And I think we probably need to wrap it up. And let's wrap it up. I will say, for me, talking about this book, I have encouraged. So we're asking our audience to please get this book. This is what it looks like. Invisible Women, Data Bias in a World Designed for Women, or for men, excuse me, by Carolyn Criado Perez. And I've been telling my girls to get it, but also my boys, really encouraging our sons to read it, to listen to Audible with your wife, with your partners, whatever.
Yeah. I think it's great. So many things that I'm learning.
Yeah.
So many things.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yep. So we're going to keep doing this. And we would love for you guys to leave comments, get the book, let us know what you're thinking. What do you want us to talk about? All of that. And I encourage you to, as women listening, to encourage your sons and your husbands and your brothers, everyone, to read it. I think it's exciting. It's actually exciting. And again, remembering that it's not malicious in any way at all.
It brings awareness.
It does.
It really just brings awareness to a lot of things.
And enriching your relationships, like really great opportunities, possible conflict, but conflict is opportunity for growth. So anyway, we're excited. But okay, so I'm Angie Gray.
I'm ReShonda Young.
And we are Sister Friends. Thanks, everybody.
All right, bye-bye. Thanks for tuning in to Sister Friends. We hope these conversations help you see things from a new angle, feel a little more connected, and maybe even laugh along the way.
Remember, whether it's family, work, or those elephants in the room we all deal with, everything really is about relationships.
If you enjoyed this episode, let us know. Share your thoughts, share this podcast with a friend, and let's keep building those connections.
Until next time, stay connected, stay curious, and let's keep growing together.